Well, hey guys, my name is Miles. I'm a commercial cinematographer and just want to talk about lighting in a volume today. Since volume stages are getting more popular and people are liking green screen less and blue screen less, let's just talk about kind of the advantages and how to work with and work in an LED volume. So first off, this is the LED screen. They come in different shapes, different sizes, and there's actually, in a volume, you'll have a screen on the ceiling here too. And sometimes you'll have some panels that can be moved around, like even underneath of an actor. And there's usually some kind of a split here where you can have lighting peek in, which we'll talk about later here. This one we had sky panel S60s and some Lecos in the ceiling there. So yeah, let's just jump into a project that I shot, and this is actually an unreleased project. I can show you a little bit of ETS, but I can't show you talent or really talk about much of the project. So we'll just jump into it. So first off, we were filming on Alexa Mini LF. This camera was chosen for its full frame capabilities, and we liked that we could get a really good shallow depth of field. And so we were actually filming with Canon FDs that were rehoused by TLS. And we chose these because they had really great soft characteristics that would kind of help us hide the pixel moire that you might get if your aperture is a bit more stepped down and kind of everything is in focus. So here we have, I believe these were 55 millimeter TLS Canon FD-X lenses. And so they're a little bit cleaner, but they still have a lot of character to them. As you can see here, we're on a Steadicam. This is Steadicam M1. And we actually were powering the entire camera and everything from the sled here. And then this little box on the top, I will talk about later, but this is what's known as the puck. And the puck is useful for, well, finding the space inside the volume as the camera travels around. So it is different than just filming like on an LED wall or a green screen. So the first kind of step in shooting on any kind of wall in general, especially a volume, is to talk to the technicians, the wall technicians, and just realize that most LED walls, pretty much all of them, sort of have like an optimal level for brightness and for color. And, you know, if you push the wall too bright, you might lose some color. If you go too dim, you might start getting flickering, or maybe panels will be not exactly the same shade, if that makes sense. So talk to your tech and see where the wall operates at its like most efficient level. Typically, they're going to run like daylight temperature. So around like the 56K, 65K, I believe is more normal, 62-ish in Kelvin temperature. So they're pretty much going to be daylight. So yeah, you're going to be messing up your circadian rhythm with these nighttime shoots. You're going to set the brightness of this screen and just go ahead and lock that in as your environmental light. And your environmental light would be like if you go outside to film, whatever the clouds are doing, whatever the sun is doing, you know, that's your environment. And so you know that you're going to have to stop your camera down, you know, using aperture or whatever, ND typically. And you want to basically set all of your lights off of kind of locked into this daylight temperature. So you can of course put like images and warmer images or whatever like on the screen, but just know that the screen is putting out whatever this is. So you might want to set your camera to that setting, or you know, you can set it a little bit warmer, but just as cinematographer, you always got to keep that in mind. And that's sort of the parameters that you're working with lighting it. Frame rates can be very restricted. So also talk to your techs about what frame rates are safe to shoot on here. And it's really good whenever you're doing like a pre-light or maybe even a scout, bring that camera in and just go to the frames that you want to, the frame rates that you want to shoot at. You know, your standard ones are typically going to be safe, 2398. It's more so just with like super slow-mo. Like I think on this wall, we could shoot up to 60 frames. And then beyond that, like 120 was basically no. But I believe most of this kind of depends on like the quality of the panels that make up the wall. The height of this particular LED volume that we were in was 16.5 feet tall. Linearly, when you spread it all out, it was 80 feet in length. Diameter of 40 because it was sort of like shaped like a horseshoe. So you could look into it and get a full 180-degree turn. And then the depth, like when you're standing at the front of the panels, the depth of it was like 19 feet. So, oh, and it also had like a partial ceiling LED row. And then we had a large softbox in front of that. So there's your full specs. I won't go over all the pixels, but for this particular wall, it's a pretty large wall. So this is a look standing inside the volume, probably like 17, 18 feet away from the wall. This is our team here walking in. And here is a really good example of, you can see these lines coming down here. Now these, were sections of panels. So these panels all come in like, I believe they're like 1 foot by 1 foot. And you essentially just attach them all in these long, long rows. So this is called a cabinet. Part of your job as DP is to never reveal the secret that this is a wall. So you always want to keep your lights essentially cut off of that wall, because if your wall is dim, say you're shooting a night sequence or something, and you have a bright light on, or a light is just like a Leica or something is cutting in and hitting the wall, you can actually expose the cabinets in a way that you'll see these vertical lines. And if you see that in your shot, there's going to be questions. So that's also something else that you're kind of juggling with the brightness of the wall, is like you can't go too dim, because then you could start seeing the cabinets as well. So that's something else to consider. And see, these are our guys on our pre-light coming up to rig. And you can see that this ceiling panel is actually translucent, basically transparent. You can see that these lights up here in the ceiling, they're basically not very obstructed. So we were hanging like Leica fixtures up there for this particular sequence when we had actors hitting different points. And you can essentially bring up light behind there. So if you have like a sky and there's a part where you want the sun to really be like coming through that like sky reflection, you can totally do that practically with like a 1200 in your ceiling or something. So that's kind of a fun thing about this ceiling LED panel. It was very much more restricting as far as it flickered whenever you kind of like change the settings too much. So you pretty much had to kind of lock it in as like your sky or your night sky, and then just leave it. Like we didn't do too much with this particular one. I'm sure there's better panels out there that you can really mess around with, but this one was locked in pretty good. You can also see over here on the corner, we had I believe it was like a 20 by 20 foot softbox here. That we had pre-lit so that when we showed up, it was already skirted and everything. Because we did have the actors walking closer to camera where they were actually coming out of the volume a little bit. And we had some night sequences. So that was a cool blue night sky coming out for that. And then of course you can see our row of lights down here, these S60s that we had. And depending on the sequence, we had those, varying colors. We actually had like a storm sequence too. And so we had them like, flashing thunder and lightning, which was kind of cool to mess with. So this wall is based in Austin, or just outside of Austin, and it's called Stray Vista Studios. Phenomenal crew down there. Really, really great to work with. There's a good look at the pixels that make up the wall. And there you can really see a strong view of those cabinets that you never want to see again. So here's this like a little overview. We actually had the wall can extend out to here, like a larger section. Well, we actually took that section, as you can see, and rebuilt it here in the middle. And that was just like a special thing that we were doing. There was a lot of like choreography, dancing involved with this, very like Broadway production. And so we actually had the actors coming out here in front of the wall, and then we would change the environment on a couple of different it was a oneer. So instead of having like a cut point, we would have them come here and sit like in a car or be like in a bedroom or something. And then we would change the environment behind them. So then they would walk back in or dance back into the new environment, So it actually worked out pretty well. And then of course you can see up here is our softbox. I think it was like a 12 by 20. It was a pretty large softbox. And then this place, Stray Vista Studio, they actually were filming, recording, I believe, like video game movements. So they had like those people in like the bodysuits that have the little dots all over them. They were actually like set up so that they could record people, doing flips and using weapons or whatever it was. In this section, whenever we weren't here, they would put like pads and stuff down. And we will talk about this later here, but these little cameras here, my little stylus is not hitting them, are all around. And these are so important. These are like the eyes of the camera. So this particular studio, and I believe most studios, use Unreal Engine And here you can kind of see like you see that bold blue line, and that's actually what the camera is seeing. So whatever you put within that box is what the camera's going to see, which leads me to another thing. You can see there's a bit of just the slightest delay ever on it. Now, there was an issue where we would have like one or two whip pans, and a whip pan is just something that is next to impossible, very difficult to do on an LED volume because the thrust is kind of like lagging a little bit, like as the computer has to render the image. So you can whip pan the camera faster than that thrust can catch up. So we kind of worked around it by making the thrust like much larger so that I could whip pan inside that thrust, and we basically had to sync it up just perfectly. And after a few takes, a bit of practice, we got it. It actually took 4 days of practice until we were able to kind of shoot our oneer, which ended up being, I believe it was like 20 minutes or 21 minutes in total. So here's our Steadicam rig. And again, this is the puck on top. And these cameras that I just pointed out a minute ago are those little things. They look like speakers up there, but they're actually like infrared cameras. So they track that puck as it floats around in space, the Z space, I guess you'd say. The camera is projecting the thrust onto the wall and sending the signal back to Unreal Engine that, hey, the camera is moving right. So your little point of view in the video game world needs to also transition. And so that's kind of the beauty of an LED volume versus just like an LED wall, is that when the camera is moving, the environment is also moving with it. And so we'll cover that here in just a second. But yes, that little puck is so important. So we had to keep that thing charging. I think we charged it once a day or just at lunch or something like that. That is the eyes of the computer to tell you where the camera is in real space. So wherever you mount that, you can't move it around. It has to be extremely visible and unobstructed. You can see some flags that we have like up here in the corner. Oh yeah, you can actually see another S60 that we had right here. And these were at different points obstructing some of these infrared cameras in the ceiling. And so we would have these points where essentially you were sort of limited on how far back you could bring the camera or how close you could bring it to this like extra portion of wall that we even had here. So like if you were right up against the wall, it would be blocking the computer's cameras, those IR cameras, from viewing the puck, and then it could glitch out. So that was also something to take into consideration. Yeah, there's another good view of our softbox in the ceiling and the LED panel on the ceiling, which is cut off. And again, here's like the thrush kind of moving around. We were building out this environment, this little diner scene. And essentially we were dialing it all in, and eventually just like, we could change little bits and pieces here. So you can kind of see as the camera like moves around the room, we were basically checking out like, does the environment light make sense? Like, do our lights outside make sense? And here we were saying, whoa, the car lights in the background are way too hot. Like, we got to bring those down. And they were way too cool. Being that it was like a 1950s diner kind of thing, these very cool headlights didn't make sense. So in Unreal Engine, we could go in with our tech, who was just phenomenal to work with, and he could go in and basically dim the parking lot street lights down and dim the headlights of the cars, change the color of the headlights of the cars. And yeah, it's just really cool to have all that control in an environment, and be able to like choose specific practical fixtures in the background and like move those around. So essentially that took like a day and a half during the pre-light to just figure out the environment, which they had mostly done. But we were basically like, as DP, if you have the opportunity to, you can light the environment in Unreal, and then you kind of bring that practical light motivation into your actual lighting. So the S60 panels in the ceiling, these were a very specific color depending on what our environment was in the background. So when we came into the diner, it was very warm, and whenever we were doing our outside in the city park, they were very cool moonlight kind of color. So here is kind of a look behind the curtain. This is actually dealing in Unreal Engine. And so you can see as we have the Z-Space camera here with the puck moving around. This is as if I am moving the camera around in Steadicam in real space. And you can kind of see a little bit of the image here of what's being projected up on the screen. So like that little block there is like the frustum, I think it is, projected onto the wall. Yeah, you kind of have to think like in that three-dimensionality of the wall, but then also the three-dimensionality of the real space that you're moving in. And this is just a map of all these little cameras that were in the ceiling. And these are just like, little, little diagram here. So you can kind of see this is where the camera is moving through space. And now you can see that there's like 3 or 4 of these cameras picking up where the puck is. That little tennis ball thing on the bottom there is like the puck in the camera. So as it's moving around, you can kind of see where like some of these cameras are blinking out a little bit. And that's where I was saying we were getting blocked by like a flag that we had set up or a light that we had fixed. And essentially you need to have good view of those IR cameras as you're moving around the space. So here's a good view of the puck actually being charged. And then we have all those IR cameras you see glowing up there now. Yeah. You can kind of see with the flag, can easily cut that off if we came back too far. So here's, we had a board technician here for some Lecos and some other lights that we had hanging up here for like a storm sequence. And there you can see a row of panels that are being lit in the ceiling here for that night blue sky. And then there was like a sunrise, so we had that brighter, of course. And then this was like a bit more of a toppy spotlight that we needed for this one specific shot. And so that was something that we kind of added on last minute. We were able to kind of pre-light it up there and just have this like very Broadway-esque spotlight come down. This is like I found these online. This is a great example of like using the wall and the ceiling element together here. And then let's say in Unreal Engine, you have like a sun set off in the distance here on the horizon. So obviously here they would put some type of a bright fixture, a Leco or something brighter up there to basically give you the lens flare in camera to help you sell the environment more. And then there's another good view down here of a perfect example of an LED use case where you have like, a spaceship flying or a helicopter or something. And you obviously want to be able to film it practically and kind of have the actors experience the environment, as they're coming over a mountain or something like that. It's just way easier than like imagining what it looks like in green screen. And it kind of just helps people get into it a little bit, but you still have the comfort and versatility of like a studio. So these guys didn't even have, obviously like up here is just like soft boxes, pretty traditional, but up here they actually have the full volume LED on the ceiling. So yeah, that was just a basic overview of lighting in an LED volume. If you have questions, just respond to this video and I do check those and I'll try to get back to you. So thanks for watching.